Hello and welcome to NetElixir's annual Cyber 5 live webinar. I am Heather Dessette and I am NetElixir's event marketing manager. And on behalf of my team, we're thrilled to share with you the latest Cyber 5 data available. Before we dive into how the team NetElixir spent their weekend, I would like to share with you and our new viewers a little bit about who we are. Since 2005, NetElixir has helped the leading e-commerce brands find and engage high-value customers and acquire game-changing insights. We offer the most up-to-date information on e-commerce and digital marketing trends to ensure that our clients exceed their goals. We are proud to be premier partners with Google, Microsoft Bing, Facebook, and UPS. And below are a few of the clients we have a privilege of helping out this holiday season. As you can see, their industries vary from food to fashion. We'd like to take a moment to remind our viewers that we'll be taking questions throughout today's presentation. Submit your questions by using the Q&A button located at the bottom of this screen. There will also be a survey at the end of today's presentation where you can share your feedback so that we can continue to improve each session. So now let's begin. Presenting NetElixir's 2020 Cyber 5 results, insights, and key holiday shopping trends is NetElixir's founder and CEO, Udayan Bose. So welcome, Udayan.
Thank you very much, Heather. Hi everyone, hope everyone is having a good holiday season so far. This has been our webinar since 2007, I believe, is when we came up with our first holiday report. And here we really focus only on the Cyber 5. But before I get started on sharing with you the results and trends from the Thanksgiving to Cyber Monday, the 5-day period, I really hope everyone is safe and doing well because this pandemic is first and foremost a massive human tragedy. And really our thoughts, prayers, and wishes for everyone's safety and well-being is what I really wanted to start with. This has been a very unique holiday season, and probably unlike any other holiday season that I have myself experienced. And as Heather mentioned, we have been, this was our 16th holiday season at NetElixir. So I'll share with you as to how exactly did we go about collecting the data and what was the data that we collected. And we really have to applaud the efforts of the NetElixir retail intelligence team who really worked around the clock to go ahead and aggregate all this information. We collected hourly search marketing and website data and analysis for our top holiday categories as such. And specifically, it aggregated to a little over 50 million sessions within this 5-day period. So it's a pretty substantial chunk of data we are talking about. The data was captured separately for mobile and desktop. We have been seeing for the last about 4 years now an ongoing growth, almost like an explosion of all the mobile visits, mobile of the website, and that is something that we really wanted to classify separately as well. For doing all of these projects, we use our own customer intelligence platform called NetElixir Insights, which really helps us to gain pretty deep insight in terms of the consumer behavior, and specifically during the holiday consumer behavior this time. This, as I mentioned, is our 13th annual Cyber 5 results report. We have had a pretty strong record in terms of when we come up with the forecast and the numbers meeting the forecast, and let us see as to how we did in terms of our forecast versus actual year. This is what we had forecasted, and this was probably one of the slowest forecasts we have done, just because of the unpredictability of this year. On Veterans Day, which was 11th of November, we had forecasted that US e-commerce would grow by 30% year on year. Essentially, and we had sort of broken it down that we believe that in November, there would be a 45% year-on-year growth. So November 2019 versus 2020. And December would have a 20% year-on-year growth. Let's see as to how we did versus our forecast. So overall, the US e-commerce sales increased by 25.6%. As you can see, it was substantially lower than our projection for 45% for November, but this is essentially only the Cyber 5 data. We saw that the Western states, or the West, grew by about 34%. Again, it was very skewed, and I'll go into a state-by-state detail as well. This is the first time that we would be revealing state-wise, at least the top states, what were the biggest winners and the biggest laggards in this entire Cyber 5 e-commerce sales growth. The central region or more of Midwest grew by about 23%, Northeast by 21%, and South grew by 27%. One of the questions that I get frequently asked is there any difference that you are seeing in terms of the growth across the coast versus that in the center? Are the urban areas, did they do better compared to the rural areas and semi-urban areas and so on? So while we don't really have that level of detail literally at the zip code, what we can share with you is this. These are the top 10 and the bottom 10 states in terms of the speed of e-commerce growth, specifically during Cyber 5. And when I mention Cyber 5, I'm talking about Thanksgiving to Cyber Monday, which recently concluded. So the top 10 states, again, New Mexico was exponential e-commerce growth, Maine, Alaska, South Dakota, Nevada, Wyoming, Idaho, Colorado, Delaware, Vermont. All of these states you would see are smaller states compared to the bottom 10 states, where there are some pretty big ones out there. Georgia is huge, Tennessee is big, Kentucky is big, Carolinas are big, Illinois, of course, New York, Minnesota, District of Columbia, West Virginia, Hawaii. So these were the laggards, and the leaders essentially were the top 10 states. Now, were there certain common threads for all of these states? I mean, other than the size and the population, not much more. If you really look at the bottom 10 states, one of the things which I think probably can be extrapolated, and the reason I use the word extrapolated because the actual reason specifically, I think maybe a lot more complex and would be dependent on multiple elements. For example, New York, when I look at New York and Illinois, both of these states have been hit really, really hard by the pandemic. And somehow we feel that there has been very clearly the pandemic effect in play, even during the Cyber 5, essentially, for at least these two states, if not the others as well. The other parts is both of these states, or let us say all the most of the bottom 10 states, they had a fairly strong internet or e-commerce penetration. I mean, if you really look at it, New York, I think in terms of the overall e-commerce penetration is one of the highest in the country, and so is Illinois, and so on. Same for Georgia as well. And that is the reason probably it was pretty interesting that somehow the folks who should have bought as much did not really buy as much, or we also even saw that fewer number of customers really made purchases during the Cyber 5. So just trying to dive a little deeper into as to what was going on. We have also tried to compare our good friends from eMarketer, and they are also joining us for this call, my good friend Andrew Lipman, who's really the editor at eMarketer who puts the holiday data. And I've really taken the numbers which eMarketer had shared as well. They also shared our optimism about the holiday season in terms of e-commerce growth. But then I think all of us were very cautious that this is going to be a completely different holiday season just given the pandemic. And we really had this multiple locations where we sort of almost like warned people that our predictions may be way off. And as you can see, yes, our predictions were actually way off. For example, this is eMarketer's prediction on the left. So Thanksgiving Day, they had predicted a 49.5% growth. In fact, NetElixir also predicted that Thanksgiving, our entire hypothesis was, since people were not really likely to travel as much, and they are going to be having smaller Thanksgiving meals, we felt that people would spend a lot more time making online shopping. Unfortunately, as you can see, Thanksgiving, this was one of the slowest Thanksgiving we have seen, at least in the last about 8 or 9 years. I mean, since the Thanksgiving really emerged as one of the key holiday, almost like a Cyber 5 day, which was, I think, in 2013, I believe. This is probably one of the slowest that we have seen Thanksgiving grow in terms of sales. Black Friday also comparatively was lower. eMarketer had forecasted 39.4%. Finally, our data set showed about 27.72%. I believe Adobe had come up with about 21.06%. So it was anyway in the about 20 to 27%, probably. Ours is the most optimistic overall number. Saturday was stronger because many of the Black Friday promotions actually spilled over to Saturday as well. And as a result of which, we saw the purchasing also continue in Saturday and Sunday. But what was really the biggest surprise, and I would say a rather disappointing surprise, essentially was the performance of Cyber Monday. This was, in terms of percentage year-on-year growth, the most muted or the slowest growing Cyber Monday in recent times. And we tried to kind of figure out as to what was going on, what were the factors in play, and there were just too many things essentially that we came up with, which let me sort of just get into some of these in the next few slides. I will also request, if anyone has any questions, if you can add to the chat box or the Q&A box, I'll be more than happy to address that at the end as much as we possibly can. We have tried to, let us first get into as to how was the overall trend, the orders by day, Thanksgiving to Cyber Monday, and how was the contribution of each one of them, probably to an extent the extension of previous slide. So one of the interesting pieces you would see, I mean, the red is the 2019 and the blue is the 2020 bar. As you can see, the orders by day, interestingly, Cyber Monday comprised or constituted a bigger percentage contribution of the overall Cyber 5. So as you can see, the graph on the left shows that Cyber Monday in 2019 accounted for about 35% almost of the entire Cyber 5 e-commerce orders. This year, actually, it came down to a little over 30%. Now, 5% decline in an overall holiday e-commerce growth, which, as I mentioned, was about 25.6%, was not really great by any means of Cyber Monday. Similarly, the revenue, Cyber Monday did better, but still it was lower compared to, in terms of contribution, compared to 2019 Cyber Monday. So we tried to dive in a little deeper. We found that Cyber Monday had the highest average order value among all the days. So these are all the different days, and these are average order value numbers across all the customers that are in the data set. And as you can, these are just take it almost like as a reference numbers rather than absolute numbers for comparison's sake. So as you can see, Cyber Monday, the average order value was $181, which was the highest, followed by Black Friday, and then it went down all the way to the AOV number on Sunday, which was $157. So AOV was very high. So then what was the problem? Why did it not grow so much? And we found that actually Cyber Monday experienced a flat sales in terms of number of orders or number of people actually who had made purchases on Cyber Monday, which was quite shocking. As I'm pretty sure all of us really know Cyber Monday to be a huge day. It still was huge because it was still the largest e-commerce day for US e-commerce ever. But still, the orders remaining same or flat is something which was definitely no one could have expected. And the reason you see that Cyber Monday still emerged as the largest e-commerce revenue day in the US was entirely because those who were buying, there are fewer number of people buying, but those who were buying were spending more per purchase occasion. So that was, I think, one of the things I really wanted to highlight, that part, which was quite shocking, because that day normally we have, if you really look at the previous years, we have seen during Cyber Monday only the percentage orders grow in double digits, at least 10 to 12% growth in orders. And this is something that we have never experienced, that the orders were almost flat on Cyber Monday compared to 2019 Cyber Monday. Moving on, we tried to find out as to what was going on, right? Where there were a few of us in the retail intelligence lab that felt that probably some amount of, let us see as to how much buzz is there around Cyber Monday. As I mentioned, the pandemic has really dampened a lot of things this year for every one of us, and it really continues at a very concerning pace. So we tried to find out as to what was the Twitter volume, how many people were tweeting with the hashtag Cyber Monday and Black Friday. And as you can see on the left, you have the number of tweets or the message volume, and we have used a tool called Social Sprout for this information. During Black Friday, there were very specifically on Black Friday about 358,000 tweets which carried the hashtag Black Friday. When you sort of go to Cyber Monday, on Cyber Monday, you would see the number was less than half, almost 1/3 of what the overall volume was on Black Friday. The average number of messages which carried through this entire period that we tracked, the Twitter volume essentially, as you can see, that number also, average messages per day, is radically lesser. It's almost like 4 times lower compared to what the number of messages was during Black or pertaining to Black Friday. So one question, rather concerning one, is was there some amount of shopper fatigue which sort of set in? Uh, and if that is so, then we really wanted to find out, was it really pertaining to certain categories or was it really across all the categories? I see a couple of questions already come in. I'll sort of try to address all the questions at the end of the presentation just to sort of continue with the flow of the presentation. So just bear with me. Talking categories, when we try to dive in, we really have been analyzing these 6 categories, and we try to dive in and find out as to what was the percentage growth in online orders in the month of November, and what was the percentage growth in online orders during Cyber 5. Now, this is again revenue numbers. So I'm sorry, I should have probably mentioned that it's a dollar value comparison. It's not the absolute number of order comparison. So it's a revenue comparison. The sales revenue in November versus sales revenue during Cyber 5. Probably not unexpected, but apparel was the slowest growing in terms of year-on-year increase. During the Cyber 5 as well, apparel actually de-grew compared to last year. Since it's actually quite surprised to see a degrowth essentially happen during the Cyber 5. And then sort of diving in a little bit more, as you can see in the food category, that was, I think, the big chunk, 70.5% overall year-on-year e-commerce growth in November. And that percentage increased dramatically, almost went to around 100% during Cyber 5. So there was a significant amount of online purchases of food and grocery segment. Gifting segment, again, surprisingly, was a little lower compared to what we had expected. But again, our expectations, as you have seen, 45% year-on-year growth in the month of November. It was definitely a lot more muted compared to that. And gifting also followed a very similar trend. Home improvement, again, when we talk about home improvement, I'm talking about home furnishings as well as home decor in this category as well. So in that part, effectively, we saw a massive growth. This was one of those few categories wherein we had a 50% plus growth during the Cyber 5, 72.3% to be precise. It grew at a very, very fast pace. When you dived in, the interesting part was not just that the number of orders grew, but also the average order value was also about 16% higher compared to essentially what it was during Cyber 5 last year. I'm sorry. Hardware and tools, this was more of the DIY tools and not much of a growth in terms of overall revenue. It was about 4%. Orders actually, again, both of them were growing at a very modest pace. Pet supplies, interestingly, again, showed a stronger growth compared to some of the other segments. But it was also, I mean, after a strong Black Friday, somehow the pet supplies overall year-on-year e-commerce growth fell essentially on Saturday, Sunday, and Cyber Monday. So overall, these are the actual numbers based on the aggregated data that we have analyzed for our own customer data set. And as I mentioned, this is like we're talking about 50 million overall sessions during these 5-day period. Based on that, the aggregated percentage increase in e-commerce revenue was 25.6%. And for the entire month of November, it actually was more promising, 29%. It was still a lot lower. I keep on mentioning this compared to what our 45% was that we had forecasted on the 11th of last month. Again, any questions, I'll be more than happy to address them at the end. But and all of this, everyone would be sort of getting a copy of these slides as well. But this, we really wanted to dive in at the category level. We wanted to also identify very specific shopping trends as well that we believe retailers need to pay attention to. So now we have seen, and I think it has been also written about fairly adequately, that this has been one of the slowest and the most unpredictable Cyber 5s ever. Now, understandably, what should the retailer do? I mean, now the holiday season is probably another about 15 days and the holiday season is over. So what should they do, and what are some of those factors and trends that retailers should really be keeping a tab on? The first one which we observed was take the liberty of mentioning the big impact of the pandemic consumer or the pandemic holiday shopper is really focusing on categories which are a lot more essential categories like food and grocery, pet supplies, and also currently relevant categories. When I say currently relevant, for example, most of us are spending a lot of time at home, and as a result of it, the home furnishings, home decor is continuing to experience a very strong year-on-year growth. But there are other categories which probably to an extent fall under the segment of want categories as such. So those are the categories like, let us say, apparel. Interestingly, we had really gone and done a deep dive within the beauty segment as well. It was very interesting to see something like makeup kits. Their sales overall fell by almost 36% year on year. So it's just very clearly the consumer today is a lot more conscious and trying to adjust and adapt to these very difficult conditions to the best of their capability. And they are trying to just keep their optimism and the spirit up. And the purchases they are making, though, are very clearly focusing on the needs category and something which is very relevant to the current times, rather than trying to have too much of an aspirational part at this point in time. And that was, I think, one of the things which came out very clearly. The second part is we were trying to think about what can be the potential reasons why this Cyber 5 did not really show as much of a growth as some of the previous ones have. And we believe there may be, again, this is, I mean, at this point in time, based on the data, what we can do is we can probably just make some hypothesis that this is maybe the reason. There seem to be certain signs that a bit of a shopping fatigue may be setting in for certain categories. Like, again, I can keep on mentioning apparel. They're experiencing year-on-year decline. Now, we tried to track back, and one of the questions, and I'll just put it on the questions because we don't have the answers, but I feel that in many cases, the questions are probably the best form of at least thinking about it. The first question, which I would really like to pose to the group, again, just as almost like a thought experiment, let us say, for a lack of a better word, is we know that this year, because of the pandemic, Amazon decided to do its Prime Day in October, mid of October, 13th and 14th of October was Prime Day. And Walmart had its big sale day around that time. Target had its big sale day, and all the companies were starting at that time, right? Was it too close to the Cyber 5 or the actual holiday season? And what was the impact that having the Amazon Prime Day or the Prime Shopping Day at that point in time, did it by any chance cannibalize some of the sales which could have happened at this time? Based on the trends that we are seeing, my personal answer, this is purely my personal opinion, would be probably yes. That's why question. It was just too close to the actual Cyber 5, and that may not really have been the best idea looking back. There was a huge amount of discussion. In fact, we participated very actively in that discussion, that will the Prime Day actually start early online holiday shopping, and will that frenzy continue? Now, as you have seen, for the entire month of November is not that bad. 29% is pretty good, but effectively it was unable to really continue, and that's where I think the fatigue is setting in, because the same promotions running, people for the last 1.5 months have been getting subjected to promotions since Prime Day, and given the rather uncertain state of the various economic variables and economic factors, understandably people are deciding so on the categories which they need, rather than really trying to really focus on the categories which are more of the want categories as such. So that was, I think, one question. And again, my personal point of view would be yes, it was too close to the Cyber 5, and as a result of which we feel that there may have been a negative impact rather than having a positive impact as was predicted. The second question, which I would say, and some of you may also probably, I mean, it's a very relevant question, is 25% bad? Now, I really wanted to clarify that 25% is not bad at all. Now, 25%, the reason we are seeing it is lower than our expectation, because as we know that the in-store number of customers and shopping has declined during the Cyber 5 dramatically, just because of the prevailing conditions in many states, which really compel people to stay at home, right? And they are not really sort of going to the malls, etc., etc. It's a very different retail shopping and the holiday shopping environment. Now, from that perspective, There was a report which was there on CNBC on the day after Black Friday that I think NRF followed up as well. They had seen a 50% decline in in-store purchases of holiday shoppers. 50% decline. Now let me put this into perspective. E-commerce or online shopping accounts for roughly about 15 to 17%, maybe 18% of the overall retail sales. So 82 to 85% still happens in stores. When that declines by 50%, we are talking about that 85 probably coming down to maybe 50%, right? So as a result of which, a lot of us had really expected the entire gap and the entire dip in the physical shopping really will go to translate or really shift to online shopping. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Some of it definitely happened, but that did not happen. So if you really look at the overall retail segment, we believe based on these numbers and the reports reported by NRF, there has been a decline during Cyber 5 of the overall retail sales between physical as well as online to the extent of about 17%. So that itself, 17% year-on-year decline, as you can understand, is a pretty high dollar number. And that can have a pretty massive repercussion or an impact on the overall economy, wherein a substantial amount and chunk is dependent on the consumer shopping. So that's where I think the shopping fatigue is something that, again, to be very honest and direct, we did not really factor that in as much. But very clearly, there seems to be some shines. We have many retailers joining us today. And my request is, these are some of the trends that we have observed. I mean, I would request you to think about it, think about the questions underlying that, and also then really plan for the remainder of the holiday season based on the data and the observations very specifically for your website. The last part was a very interesting one, and this shows probably, and that's the reason I have used the word challenge, the state of uncertainty around this holiday season. So we saw for almost every category, there were more frequent website visits in shorter time. Before getting into that, let me explain as to what do I mean by latency. Latency is the time between the first visit to the website till the time I make a purchase. Let us say I visit the website today and I make a purchase after 3 days. So essentially the latency or the time is 3 days. So we saw that this latency shrunk. So people were either buying or not buying, whatever it was, but they were that time period was more compressed, which is to be expected because we are spending a lot more time online. So essentially, which is to be expected, we are doing everything is a lot more expedited, and we had seen this earlier in our earlier webinars that we have been doing on a monthly and a bi-weekly basis. We had said that the latency has shrunk. We also saw during this time, the shoppers visited the websites more frequently, about 13% more across within the shorter time. So it was like shorter span of time, and within that, the shoppers were visiting the website more frequently. Now, the question that I would pose to you, we have a lot of retail marketers here. May it be possible for us to maybe extrapolate this entire behavior to that they were really looking for fresh promotions. They were probably expecting some amount of surprise promotions. And my question to the retailers was, did we or did you surprise them adequately with promotions which compelled them to make a purchase? Unfortunately, based on the results, the answer is no. I think when we really analyzed the sales promotions, there were two very clear, or maybe three different classes of promotions there. There probably about 30% of all the retailers, they started their Black Friday promotions as early as that Monday, which was the 23rd of November. And the same promotions continued. So if you really look at 23rd and 24th November, the sales were pretty high, but then it subsided, and then the shoppers kept coming back to the website, no change in the promotion. They came back again, no change, and so on. And after a certain amount of time, they just sort of gave up and they left. So the thought was, if this trend is to be kept in mind, there should have been probably an opportunity to create more excitement in the promotions, which probably could have changed this number a little bit in terms of percentage purchases. Now, again, that is just an assumption based on essentially the data that we have. We don't know what we don't know. But that is, I think, one of the extrapolations of this entire shopper behavior that we are seeing. One category where we sort of dived in, as I mentioned about the beauty category earlier. In fact, I mean, Glossy has a nice coverage about our research that we have done. You can sort of check it out using this link. We saw that the latency for the beauty category went down by 19%. So typically from the time the potential shopper landed on the website till the time they made a purchase, it went down from 204 minutes to 166 minutes. Right? Within that time, people were doing a lot more research, and just trying to sort of find out if there are new promotions, something exciting, and so on and so forth, etc. So that has to be kept in mind, because that seems to be, to an extent, probably going to be an ongoing theme of shoppers for the rest of the holiday season as well. So let me repeat all these three, because these are very three important holiday trends, which I think it's very important for marketers to really note this, to really be able to fine tune and adjust their promotions for the remainder of this holiday season. The first is the needs category definitely prevailed over the wants category, right? So very clearly we have data which proves that. Shopping fatigue may be setting in. How do you really make it exciting for the shoppers is a big question. I mean, I gave the example of the promotion, I think, which is an opportunity, or can you do something interesting, exciting? In fact, one of our clients mentioned that they have been launching doorbusters in a very planned manner, but there is something exciting on the website going on, which really compels the shopper to keep coming back to the website and checking it out, right? And in many cases, the purchases, the conversion rates sort of go up in that case. The third part is the latency challenge, which is an interesting one. So people will keep on coming more frequently to your websites if you are selling, obviously, what they're interested in buying. But you really have to make the entire experience a lot more meaningful for them, a lot more exciting for them. And that's where I think a lot of your promotions over the remainder of this period or this holiday season should be really focused on that. So those are the three trends. With that, let me move on to the next piece, which is a little more detailed. So now we have talked about the category level, we have talked about the top days, we have talked about some of the key trends. Now let us see as to what are the top day parts. When did the shoppers really buy online? And I'll just do it for the entire 5-day period, the Cyber 5. So this was the trend this year. So 5.94% of all the people who shopped, they made the purchases between midnight and 6 a.m. And again, this is local time, right? About 6%. 27% made the purchases between 6 a.m. and noon, 35% between noon and 6 p.m., and 31 or 32% between 6 p.m. and midnight. Let us look at as to how does it really compare with the 2019 numbers. So these are the 2019 numbers. So 6.76% was the percentage of shoppers who shopped between noon and midnight and 6 a.m. That number was a little lower, 5.94%, about a percentage point lower. 26% went up a little bit. So more people were shopping between 6 a.m. and noon. Noon to 6 p.m., 32.61%, that actually went up quite substantially. 3% increase is quite substantial given the overall number of sessions we are talking about. So most people purchased then, and fewer people purchased essentially compared to last year between 6 p.m. and midnight. So it probably is again just because since we are always on and we are mostly at home, I think we are seeing very clearly that the shopping purchases or shopping occasions are getting clubbed in or bunched in between a lot more between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. As you can see, this is 2019 data. Last year was about 30 to 26, about 58.6%. This year, that number has gone up to almost 62% or 63%. So very clearly, people are spending more time in the normal day hours to really sort of make those purchases. Why is it important for a marketer? Because as you are running your promotions and you're writing your advertising, it is always recommended to really pay attention to these trends, to really run your advertising a lot more effectively, whether it is on Facebook, Instagram, you're running ads, or whether you're on paid search, you're running the ads, or Amazon ads is what you're running, whatever it is, it always is helpful to really focus on these day parts. One question, which obviously is a big question, which is there, is how big will the impact of mobile be this year? And as we see that mobile orders this year contributed to 55% of the site-wide orders. The average order value still continues to be lower than desktop by 38%. Now, as you would see that this was the first year when the percentage of orders through mobile devices actually exceeded the percentage of orders through desktop. It was very close last year, as you would see the numbers 2019. It was almost about 47, 48% last year, but that went up quite dramatically to 55% this year. So mobile very clearly is the primary channel now in terms of purchases as well. It already was the primary channel when it comes to the number of visits or sessions. And diving into the category level thing, you would see that in the apparel segment, now 81% of the impressions, so the people who are visiting your website, are coming from mobile devices. 68% for pet supplies, for the food and grocery segment, about 58%, gifting 67% across. So across the board, it is 60% to 80%. For the beauty category, it's close to about 90%, 91% to be precise. When you talk about the orders part, you would see that apparel again has a big chunk, 79%. Then I ask a fundamental question. The people who were buying this time, apparel segment saw a drop on Cyber 5. They probably were a very strong, committed apparel shoppers. And as a result of which, they are much more evolved in their purchasing behavior when it comes to using the mobile devices and their comfort level with the mobile devices. So the core group of apparel shoppers really are very comfortable purchasing using mobile. And that's the reason you see that 79% of all the apparel orders really came from mobile devices. For pet supplies, it was 52%, food and gourmet was 39%, and so on. The speed at which this is increasing, and the pandemic definitely has had a big effect because we are at home, we probably are constantly on our phones as well as iPads or whatever devices that we have. So essentially, I think this, in the next, maybe mid of next year, I think we forecast that this would probably become a norm. What you are seeing in the apparel segment would probably most likely become a norm. Probably about 70% of all the conversions and maybe about 80% of all the impressions would really happen for the mobile devices. Now, the reason I wanted to emphasize this, I still cringe to see a lot of companies still having subpar mobile experience. So if there was one message loud and clear that the consumer has really shared with all of us retail marketers, is let us focus first and mobile as the primary device in terms of purchase going forward. I think, and let us pay a little more attention in terms of improving the mobile shopping experience for our consumers. We wanted to do a very unique study this year, and this is the first time that we are doing a study of this type. Since this was a very different holiday season because of the pandemic, we wanted to check what is the impact that the new products, so new products essentially is any product which has been launched after 31st of December 2019. So basically launched this year, right? From the 1st of January onwards. What percentage contribution did it really have in terms of the overall revenue during Cyber 5? It was a very interesting study, primarily because it tells a lot in terms of the amount of innovation, but it also tells about as to what do the consumers really prefer. No surprise, I think fashion and apparel, 84% of the revenue came from products which were launched exclusively in 2020. 84%, I repeat this because it's such a shockingly high number, came of the revenue during Cyber 5 came from products which were launched exclusively in 2020. That percentage comes down in food and gourmet because a lot of staples have been purchased. But if you really look at something else like gifting, 50% were novel gifts, electronics 36%, understood, pet supplies 20%, and so on. So a fundamental question, which I would really want to pose for all the retailers, and we have quite a few folks from the merchandising and the product segments as well, the manufacturers are here as well. The question that I would pose to all of you is, how much focus are you really placing in terms of product innovation? How much time are you really investing in terms of understanding the consumer preferences and coming up with a very clear pipeline or a roadmap for introducing new products? Because new products, as you can see right in front of you, the consumer has sent out a very clear message to all of us that we need to constantly innovate and come up with a new product to the market to really sort of drive up the sales. I shudder to think of what would have happened in the fashion and apparel industry had the new products not gotten launched and so on. So this, I think, the clear message that the consumer has sent to us, please innovate. That, I think, is the message. I can't really say it more directly than that. I will just quickly wrap up and then we'll sort of move into the questions. Our outlook for remainder of the 2020 holiday season. I mean, has been difficult. As you can see, making a prediction during this time has been really, really difficult. And just because there have been a lot of things that we have really mispredicted or wrongly predicted, essentially. So how does it look like now that we have a better trend? And we also know that Cyber 5 has a substantial impact in the overall the holiday trends and the holiday shifts. How does the overall holiday outlook look like? So this is the category wise. We'll sort of get into a very detailed level in terms of category wise. So 29% we have already gone through, and all of these are, by the way, sales. I am really sorry for not really highlighting the dollar part. This is all sales revenue. So apparel, we don't see things changing, unfortunately, very dramatically this month as well. We are forecasting a flat, maybe -2% in terms of overall year-on-year revenue. Now, again, I must really classify that. If you remember that last year, December 2nd was Cyber Monday. So obviously the Cyber Monday advantage is there. But the other part which we have to keep in mind is for most retailers, the last shipping cutoff date essentially is between the 10th to 15th for on-time delivery before the holidays or before Christmas. Right, so that has to be kept in mind as well. So we literally have about 12 days to really make it happen. So that really is playing a pretty big part in slightly more conservative projections for the month, where we are projecting the year-on-year e-commerce sales will go up only by 13%. If you remember our previous projection on the 11th of November, it was 20%. We are reducing that to 13% now. And that's just to incorporate the shipping cutoff days, the inventory challenges probably that will be faced as well, along with the slightly muted numbers that we have got during the Cyber 5. So overall, we are actually reducing our projection from initially a 30% year-on-year increase in terms of e-commerce sales during the holiday season, which is November and December. We are lowering that percentage to 19%. That becomes our final number essentially that we would sort of go ahead with. So again, this is again just to emphasize as to what I mentioned. We are revising down our original growth projection from 30% to 19% year-on-year growth in terms of e-commerce revenue in November and December combined. Now, what does it mean for a lot of the retailers, retail marketers? I think if you really classify, there are three different groups that we were able to sort of almost like segment all the retailers in. The first group essentially were companies or which belonged in categories which have less than 5% e-commerce growth. Companies like apparel, in many cases, I think some parts of the beauty products also were very slow. Jewelry was very slow and so on. So that's, I think, one segment. The second segment is between 5% and 15% e-commerce growth during Cyber 5. And the third segment is 15% plus. Now, it goes without saying that all the three segments need to have very different category, not category, basically type of promotions and the overall plans for the remainder 12 or 15 days of the holiday season that's left there, essentially. But I think it's important to recalibrate the expectation also based on the Cyber 5 and then really define the strategy based on the observation that you are having for your own website. So that's what we had in terms of the overall data share. This is something that we are offering to all the attendees who are there on today's webinar. I mean, this real Cyber 5 and the holiday season, as you have seen, has been very uncertain, and there are a lot of lessons that we have learned as a company working with over 120 retail customers currently in the US. And we would love to make give you an opportunity to really participate in this strategy playbook process. It's more of a consultative process where we work with you, share with you some of the trends which essentially we believe will impact the 2021 overall the retail numbers across categories. And we'll be happy to work with you and help you build a playbook for digital marketing essentially for the new year, for 2021. You can sign up using NetElixir.com/2021 playbook. So with that, I'll pause at this point in time and maybe just check for any questions that we may have really sort of got. So the first question is from David. Do your statistics look to days prior to Cyber 5? Yes. David, we have looked at data prior to Cyber 5. Did people promote earlier? Yes, people did promote earlier. And in fact, we had published this between the 1st November to 23rd of November, which was like 2 days essentially prior to Thanksgiving. The e-commerce sales was actually up by 37% for our database, 37%. The Cyber 5, as you have seen, was lower. And as a result of which, it pulled down the entire November to 29% from what for the first 23 was 37%. And about 30% of all the retailers that we were able to analyze, they did promote. They started their promotions early this year. Many of the retailers started their promotions around the 23rd, which was into the Black Friday week or the Thanksgiving week. And there were some retailers who really had aggressive promotions during 1 week prior, which is the week of 16th of November as well. The second question is on the slides. They are focusing on 5 key days. Many retailers started the Black Friday sales. They're pretty similar to up to 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. Sales compared, as I mentioned, it was 37% was actually the number that we saw between 1st and 23rd of November. But overall, November was about 29%. The reason, again, I mean, 29% is something that we should all be very happy about, only if the retail physical store sales would have been at least flat. But in this case, I think there are very clear reports published by NRF where the physical sales store sales are down by almost 50%, maybe a little lower, right? Which means that there is a very massive shrinkage in terms of the overall retail sales, which has really happened during Cyber 5. I will read about some of the other questions. What about health and personal care? We have the information, Steve. We'll have to really pull that, and I can definitely share that with you separately as well. I don't have it up front here, but one question which came from Stephen, is it Stephen? I feel the early sales cannibalized Cyber 5 sales to some degree. All I kept hearing was buy early, with all the sales continuing it after Prime Day. It no doubt cut into Cyber 5. It seems so. I mean, it very clearly seems so. It very, very clearly seems so, Steve, because I would actually sort of say that the entire trend started with the Prime Day. I don't have anything against Prime Day. The only thing is because it was done in the spirit that there is a tremendous amount of pent-up retail demand and everything would shift online. But as you have seen, things don't really shift online so quickly for the non-essential categories, at least. And as a result of which, I think maybe that was not really such a great idea to do Prime Day on the 13th or 14th. But again, if you really look at the aggregated sales, I think many merchants in the essential categories and categories which have got really this pandemic bump, essentially they really did very well. Unfortunately, the non-essential categories or the want categories did not really do as well. So health and personal care, I think, is a question which is coming up time and again. I'll share that separately with you as well. Vanessa, your question, I think many did not take into consideration the days following Cyber Monday and the days pre-Black Friday. Absolutely. So pre-Black Friday, I have already shared, Vanessa, that it was about 37%. So it was going pretty strong, right? So from 37% suddenly shrinking to 26% is a little bit of a disappointment. After Cyber Monday, the last few days have been okay. I mean, it has not been great. We saw an immediate drop, and then again, the numbers have been settling out the normal. But I think the trend is very clear. People are preferring to purchase on the essential categories, not as much on the non-essential categories and so on. So where people invest dollar has really changed quite substantially. So that I think is are the 5 or 6 questions that we had. But I really wanted to thank all of you for joining this. We will be sharing this deck with everyone. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me directly. My first name, udayan@netelixir.com, or you can just write to university@netelixir.com. And I will really want to sort of end with wishing you and your families a very happy holidays from our entire team at NetElixir. Thank you for joining us, and good luck, and wish you holiday success for the remainder of the holiday season. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you joining us. Happy holidays to all of you.